Hello everyone and welcome to this video. This is my first official video on YouTube following my intro. This video is actually going to be a ranking of the Keane discography. For anybody who doesn't know, Keane is a British band formed sometime in the late 90s. They're kind of an alternative pop rock band. A lot of influence from like the Beatles, Radiohead, The Cure, The Smiths, stuff like that. Similar bands include like Coldplay, Snow Patrol, Muse, Mew, and Keane are my favorite band because basically their songwriting is just incredible in my opinion. It's very melodic, very catchy, very hooky, very sing-along. Tom Chaplin has a great voice, one of the best singers of all time. Great falsetto, very pleasant, sweet musical voice. And then Tim Rice-Oxley, the keyboard player, songwriter, and lyricist, just just a genius, basically, at music. Knows how to write great songs, great lyrics, very meaningful, very deep, but also applies to a lot of different people and a lot of different scenarios. So that's kind of the beauty of Keane, in my opinion, my favorite band. And so my least favorite Keane record, although I still think it's pretty great, is Cause and Effect, right here. This one came out in 2019, and it's sort of their comeback record because Keane were on hiatus from, I believe, 2012 to 2019. And, you can kind of tell that they've been away for a while. It's a bit different. I'd say this one has a few more tracks that are a little more. There's a song on here called Love Too Much, which is very poppy, very optimistic, and it feels kind of forced. Then again, there are other songs on this record that are really beautiful, like some of my favorites are Your Love, or not Your Love, I Need Your Love. That's my favorite track on the album. Usually the ending of every Keane album is pretty good. There's another song called I'm Not Leaving, which is very pretty, very melodic, and kind of has a haunting sound to it. And then Thread, which I also think is very heartfelt and touching. But just in general, this album is kind of about how Tim Rice-Oxley, the major songwriter of the band, was going through a divorce. And so there are a lot of songs kind of examining that, questioning what went wrong, regret for decisions made and stuff like that. So it's a very good sort of like breakup record. If you're going through that, it has a lot to say about that. There's a lot you can actually learn from Tim Rice-Oxley's experience going through a divorce. But just in general, it has a couple weaker songs amidst the highlights. So that's number 5, Cause and Effect by Keane. At number 4, I'm going to go with Perfect Symmetry. This is the band's third album, came out in 2008. This one's interesting because it kind of deviates from their original sound, which was just keyboards, vocals, and bass, as well as drums. Tim Rice-Oxley on the first 2 albums actually did both the keyboards and the bass at the same time, so he was really doing a lot of heavy lifting there. But Perfect Symmetry is kind of a deviation because rather than going with just kind of like the plain keyboard-driven sound, they add in some guitars, more electronics, and generally kind of go for more of like an 80s sound, bringing in influences from like David Bowie, Talking Heads, New Order, I think you could say, and just kind of like using more of that 80s kind of like pop, synthy, bright sound. I think this record has a lot of good stuff. Some of the highlights are Spiraling, The Lovers Are Losing, Better Than This, You Haven't Told Me Anything, Perfect Symmetry, Love Is the End. So I think about half these tracks are like really brilliant, some of Keane's best material, and then the other half is just kind of, it's very good, but it's not as good. Um, and so this record, I think, is really, it really kind of stands out as their most experimental, you could say, trying to bring in some of those more eccentric influences. It's kind of like they're having fun and they don't really care what people think of this album. So, very good. I'd still give it like a B plus, A minus, but that's number 4, Perfect Symmetry by Keane. I keep saying by Keane. These are all by Keane, obviously. Number 3, we're gonna go with Strange Land, which came out in 2012. This was actually the last album before Keane went on hiatus for 7 years, I believe. And this one is kind of a return to form after Perfect Symmetry. It's a little more stripped back, I'd say, more ballady compared to Perfect Symmetry. Kind of returning more to that keyboard-led sound of the first 2 albums, but not quite like dialing it all back, because it does feel kind of more like orchestrated, I guess, and there are more strings on it, I think. This one's kind of a sadder album, I would say. It's sort of about loss and changes and moving on, and kind of like where you grew up and how where you grew up influences you, and kind of like remembering the good old days and those friendships, but also like parting ways and taking different paths and that kind of thing. Disconnected, I think, was the first single from this album, and it's a really good choice because not only is the music video really good, by a horror director, I believe, but just a very, very relatable song about like losing touch with somebody, feeling like there's an invisible wall between you, not knowing what happened to your relationship, and kind of, the anxiety that can cause. It's also got great tracks like The Starting Line, which I find really emotional, and Sea Fog, which is very sad. Kind of just about depression and how you have to continue to struggle through things when they're at their hardest. So, Strangeland, fantastic album, and coming in at number 3. Number 2, we're gonna go with the debut album, Keane, Hopes and Fears. This is the first album that I actually fell in love with. The first band I was ever introduced to was the Beatles, and I loved them ever since I was a child. They were my mom's favorite band, and, I was just instantly hooked. Stuff like Yellow Submarine, Octopus's Garden, really child-friendly, but then you get into, like, Let It Be, and Hey Jude, and all those other masterpieces, so that kind of got my love of music started. But the first time I actually heard any music on my own that really kind of spoke to me was when I heard Somewhere Only We Know on the radio, which instantly just kind of hit me in a different way. I was just like, this is so beautiful, this means so much, and it really just kind of like captured my imagination. And so I went home, went to iTunes, had to like look it up, download it, and since then my love of Keane had been born. Essentially I later got this album for Christmas that year, just listened to it all the time, loved every single track, was like singing it all the time. This album just has such a classic sound, the songwriting is just so good, the melodies are so good, the lyrics, especially when I believe I got into this when I was like 14 years old or something like that. So like all of these, new feelings about like becoming an adult, well, not yet, but more adult-ish feelings. Sort of, it really just kind of contextualized a lot of the emotions I had and a lot of the thoughts I had about people and relationships and, kind of what it means to be changing and growing up and moving on and stuff like that. Every song on here is just amazing, but some of the highlights are Somewhere Only We Know, Bend and Break, Might As Well Be Strangers, Everybody's Changing, Your Eyes Open, and Bed Shaped. Bed Shaped is an incredible song. You'll understand when you hear it. So coming in at number 2, Keane, Hopes and Fears. And number 1 Keane album is Under the Iron Sea. This came out in 2006, and I think the members of Keane, especially Tim Rice-Oxley, kind of described this one as like a dark fairy tale, and that's a great description of it, because if you remember back in 2006, the war in Iraq was going on. We couldn't trust our politicians, not that we can now, probably even less, but just a lot of dark things happening in the world, causing a lot of like confusion and mistrust and fear and stuff like that. And this album really captures that kind of feeling of feeling like dislocated, lost, not sure where to turn. Is It Any Wonder is kind of like the main song as far as that goes. It's also got Nothing in My Way, which is kind of a song about like denying your emotional stress. Leaving So Soon is good. Bad Dream. And The Frog Prince, which is kind of about like changing, becoming a different person, not remembering who you were, what made you a good person, and that kind of thing. But I think this album is just an absolute masterpiece. Still probably in my top favorite records of all time. Just something about the songwriting and the sonics of this album, the sort of heavy subject material but delivered in a way that's very melodic and tasteful and enjoyable. You've still got all those sing-along choruses, which, kind of make the pill go down easier. But Under the Iron Sea by Keane, this is what I consider to be their masterpiece. Everybody needs to hear this album, I think, and it's part of what makes Keane so great. And then just to wrap it up, 2 other Keane records I have on vinyl are Keane 20, Live from Mexico City, 2024. This album features entirely songs from their first album, Hopes and Fears. Very good. You can tell that it's sort of like a more recent release. They sound a little more wise, knowledgeable, like they've been on the scene for a while. But really captures sort of the energy and the spirit of those songs. And then the other one I have is Keane Live at Paradiso 29/11/04. And this is a really early one. 2024 was actually the year that Hopes and Fears came out. This has a bunch of tracks from there, a couple early B-sides, and 2 songs that would later appear on Under the Iron Sea in kind of their earlier versions, which is pretty interesting. So yeah, that's the end of my first video on Keane, a discography ranking. Again, my favorite band, great band, in my opinion, the best band of all time. If you're a fan of like the Beatles or The Cure, The Smiths, Muse, Coldplay, Snow Patrol, this is definitely a band you're going to love. You've probably heard them on the radio, songs like Atlantic, Is It Any Wonder, Can't Stop Now, Everybody's Changing, Somewhere Only We Know, Nothing in My Way. These were all songs I heard on the radio as a kid growing up. And yeah, Keane, wonderful band. Check them out if you haven't. And thank you so much for watching. Please like and subscribe. Leave any comments if you like. And yeah, stay tuned. Thanks.